Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. And we have a great treat for our classrooms joining us today. One of our favorite virtual field trips to do is down to the Florida Keys to the Turtle Hospital, where they specialize in rescuing and rehabilitating sea turtles. Right now, they have over 50 turtles at the facility with all different types of ailments and different stages of recovery. We're very lucky to hang out with Teresa today, who's going to give us a little tour, tell us about some of the turtles and the work that they do at the Turtle Hospital. So Teresa, as always, it is great to see you today.
It's great to be here. So we'll start off with some of these guys. These are some of our permanent resident sea turtles. And so sometimes we get turtles that come in that are injured and we get them healthy, but they still not quite survive on their own in the wild. Something kind of prevents them from being released. So they get to stay here. They become non-releasable, and we've got a nice 100,000-gallon tidal pool that they get to live in. So it's connected directly to the ocean, because the ocean is not that far away. One of the perks of living on an island. So it's kind of a more natural pool, because it has a rocky, sandy bottom. There's little fish that can come in and out. It's basically as natural as we can make.
We need to be.
And so most of our permanent residents are here because they float. And so floating in the wild is not normal because they eat at the bottom, they sleep at the bottom, they do everything at the bottom. The only time they're ever up at the surface is to breathe. But they'll come up, breathe, and then they'll go right back down. So if they are stuck up at the top, unable to dive, that's a problem. You cannot release a floating turtle, so they stay here. Most of our floaters have what we call bubble butt syndrome, which is what happens when they get hit by a boat, and that boat strike causes air to get trapped underneath their shell. And typically it also causes nerve damage as well. So kind of combination of those things means that we can't get rid of that floating, so they get to stay here. But to make them a little bit more comfortable while they're here, we attach lead weight to the outside of their shell. So like some of these turtles have little gray ovals or circles on their butts. Those are weights. So that way when they want to, they can go down to the bottom and go to sleep. But eventually the weights fall off, so then they're back to floating again. So like this guy, this is Chance, because he kind of got a second chance on life. And so he's got bubble butt, and Chance has one little weight on his butt. But Kent, the big guy, Kent's about 170 pounds, so a little bit bigger. Kent has like 4 weights glued to his left side. But these guys, these are green sea turtles. And the green sea turtles are one of the more common species that we get. But even though they're called the green turtles, they're not actually green. They're brown. But they're herbivores. So in the wild, they eat lots of seagrass and algae. Here, they get romaine lettuce, kale, green peppers, green stuff. And they eat so much green stuff that their fat, their insides, turn green. So it's kind of like you are what you eat. Just be glad it doesn't work that way for us, because we'd be all kinds of different colors. But because the green sea turtles are herbivores, there's no competition for food, which means that you can put the green turtles together. Because in the wild, sea turtles are solitary, so they don't travel in groups. So the movie Finding Nemo got that bit wrong. It's that they don't meet their parents. They don't go traveling the currents together. So when you do put them together like this, for the most part, they just ignore each other. They'll steal food from each other, they'll knock into each other, but they're not being mean. They just don't care. It's not in their little brains to have social etiquette. But like most of these guys have bubble butt. But we have 2 permanent residents that do not have bubble butt. One of them is this guy. This is Montel. So Montel came in with a lot of drama. He's had pretty much everything that could possibly happen to a turtle be done to him. So he's been hit by a boat, bit by a shark, entangled in fishing line, and he's had tumors. So Montel is missing half of his right front flipper, all of his left front flipper, his right eye, and his shell is dented on the left side. So when a turtle is just missing one flipper, but they still have the other three, they have enough flippers, they can learn how to adapt. They can still be released. But missing more than one flipper and an eye, Montel is just not very fast. So he is not able to be released. But that's okay. He can hang out in here. He doesn't have to be very fast. He doesn't have to worry about boats or sharks or anything like that. But these guys are all doing pretty good. But we do have quite a few green sea turtles. They're the most common species that we have. The other common species that we get in the Florida Keys are called the loggerheads. And while we do have one loggerhead in our big pool here, he sometimes likes to hide, so we don't see him very often. But we do have more loggerheads that are patients. Oh, we're going to stop by Bowie here for a second. This is Bowie. She is our largest turtle. She's about 300 pounds. So she's a floater. But even though she is 300 pounds, she's not fully grown yet. Green sea turtles will get to be about 500 pounds, shell length of just about 5 feet long. And sea turtles will never stop growing. So the older the turtle, the larger they are. That's really the only way that you can guesstimate their age is based off of their size. Average lifespan is about 70 to 100 years. So Bowie at 300 pounds is probably between like 45 to 60 years old. So pretty good sized turtle. Okay, so loggerheads. And so the loggerheads that we do get, they get quite large as well. They can get to be up to about 400 pounds. But we'll do a nice little shot of the ocean. I'll talk about the ocean in a little bit. But our loggerheads will start off with Duesenberry. Duesenberry is only about 100 pounds. So a little bit on the smaller side, but still has that very large head. That's why they're called loggerheads. But Duesenberry came in just about 2 months ago because he was found floating. So like I said, that floating is not good, but nothing else was wrong on the outside. So no boat strikes, no tumors, no entanglements, nothing. But because he was floating, we knew that something was wrong. So we brought him in, we did x-rays, found out that he had a blockage in his intestines. So we call it impaction. Basically, he ate some stuff he wasn't supposed to, and he got constipated and gassy. And so we've been giving him medications to help him poop and get rid of that gas, and he's doing much better. But depending on where within their systems that blockage is and that gas is, kind of depends on how these turtles float. So when Duesenberry first came in, Duesenberry was sideways. So we put Velcro down each side of the shell so that way we could add little foam blocks, sort of like floaties, help level them out. But at this point, Duesenberry is just floating butt up, which is a good sign. It means that that last of that blockage is sitting right there at the very, very end. Like a couple of good poops. The last of it will come out, and then she'll be able to sleep on the bottom. And then once that happens, then they're able to be released. But typically these turtles are here about 2 to 3 months. So doing pretty good. Just around 2 months so far, so kind of right on track. And you can tell that Duesenberry's feeling better because he's pretty active. Think about you. When you get sick, you get very weak and tired and you sleep a lot. Well, same thing for the turtles. Once they start feeling better, that's when they start getting more active. So kind of as an example, we have Izzy. Izzy's about 120-pound loggerhead, impacted, just like Duesenberry. But whereas Duesenberry's been here for 2 months, Izzy's only been here only about a month. So he still floats quite a bit. So we have the Velcro on Izzy's shell with the little foam blocks, like the floaties. Izzy's currently eating. That's why her head's all the way down there at the bottom. In the wild, the loggerheads are carnivores. So they eat crab, lobster, conch, anything with that hard shell. So when they're here and they're sick, we can't give them anything with a hard shell. So we don't want to kind of add to their problems. So instead they get squid and fish, stuff that's a little bit easier for them to digest. And because they do eat the hard-shelled animals, a lot of times their impactions are kind of a combination of some of that shell, but also typically bits of trash or plastic. Because sea turtles will eat pretty much anything, especially things that look like food when they're in the water, things like balloons or plastic bags. But Izzy's doing really good. He's been pooping out all sorts of fun stuff. And sometimes it's quite a large bit. One of our newest turtles, this is Coco. Coco is doing awesome. Coco's 190 pounds, a little bit underweight, like should weigh a little bit closer to 240, 250. But Coco came in last week. It was a week yesterday. But he was found floating, and Coco's huge. Like his head is bigger than my hand, which means that the boat that found Coco couldn't get Coco on their boat. There was only 2 of them. They tried. They're like, we can't lift this turtle. So we called Coast Guard, or we'll call Fish and Wildlife. We'll get one of their boats out to help. And so, luckily, Coast Guard was available. They went out, helped get Coco on the boat and bring her in. But Coco had a massive impaction. 2 days ago, passed about 1.5 pounds, mostly shells, but also little bits of plastic. So most of Coco's impaction is already gone, which is pretty impressive. He must have been ready to come out on his own. He just needed a little bit extra help. But we just kind of have to fatten him up. I have to make sure that he's nice and strong and healthy, back up to the weight he's supposed to be before he does get released. But doing very, very good. For the first 2 days that Coco was here, he didn't do anything. He wasn't strong enough, so we kind of kept him on a mat. We gave him a sprinkler because we didn't trust him to actually lift his head up in water. We didn't want him to accidentally drown. But after like a few days of nutrition and medications, he kind of turned completely around. So now we can put him in water. It's not a very deep water. It's only about 1.5 feet deep because he still gets tired very easily. So this is our version of bed rest. So this way he can swim around when he wants to, but if he does get a little bit tired and he just wants to sleep, he just has to lift his head up to breathe. Once he gets even better and he gets stronger, he stops getting quite so tired quite as quickly, then yes, we'll start giving him some deeper water, giving him the bigger tanks. But at this point, we want him to rest. We want him to heal. We don't want him just to waste energy swimming around. And Coco is a boy. Coco's got a nice long tail there. Kind of curls around the back of the shell. Because when the turtles are younger, you can't tell just by looking at them if they're a boy or a girl. So we sometimes end up with turtles with the wrong names. Like we have a Kevin, who's a girl. We have an April, who's a boy. Turtles don't care. They don't know what their names are. But it's only once they hit adulthood, so about 25, 30 years old. Then if they're a boy, they get a very long tail. It gets to be up to about 13 inches in length. Whereas if they're a girl, tail stays really short, doesn't go past the end of their shell. But Coco's not going to miss any piece of his breakfast. But they eat on average between 1% to 3% of their body weight a day. So the larger the turtle, the more they eat. It can be quite a bit of food. Okay, but those are some of our loggerheads. We'll go to one of our little green sea turtles. This is No Name. And so it's typically the people that find our turtles that get to name them. That's why sometimes they do have some very strange names. So like Coco was found off of Coco Plum Beach, which is one of the beaches down here. But No Name, it's not that she doesn't have a name, it's that her name is No Name. She was found off of No Name Key. So it makes her kind of fun. But she's a green sea turtle. But she has tumors. And so she's got those little growths on her neck. That's what she has left. When she came in, she had those little tumors all over both eyes, all over her neck, both front flippers, her rear flippers. She was a mess. But now she is doing much better. She's had surgery a few times. We've removed most of them, but still needs probably one more surgery to get the rest of her tumor free. But it's something that the green sea turtles get. It's a virus called fibropapilloma, FP for short, and it's caused by water pollution. Because these green sea turtles are the ones that live near shore in the seagrass beds, which is where the water pollution, the runoff, is the greatest. And then the seagrass are kind of the natural filters for the ocean. So they take in the polluted waters, clean it up, and then release the cleaner water. And then these turtles come along and eat the polluted seagrass, which then makes them sick. And so No Name's already been here since the middle of November, so he's doing much better. Once they're completely tumor-free, then they're able to be released. And then sometimes, when the turtles don't eat on their own, we have to use tongs. We don't want to use our fingers, because they don't always get the food right away. Sometimes they miss, so we use the tongs, so when they do miss, they don't get our fingers. But Judy came in entangled in a crab trap. We had to amputate her left rear flipper because that entanglement had caused so much damage, we weren't able to save it. And so she's still trying to learn kind of how to swim around. It's only been a couple weeks since the surgery, so she still needs just a little bit of help. But she'll get there. It'll take her a few months for her to completely heal. And then once she is completely healed and she can swim around perfectly fine, then she'll be able to be released. But she has no problem with the eating bit. It's just sometimes she doesn't want to take it right away. But she does pretty good. Okay. But some more of our little green sea turtles. And so Judy, missing one flipper, she can still be released. Because she still has the other three, she can still swim around perfectly fine. But we have some turtles, like Kevin here. Kevin was bit by a shark. Kevin is missing both front flippers. So with two rear flippers and two little nubs up front, Kevin is not going to be very fast. So the chances of her being released are very, very low. But we'll wait till she completely heals, and then we'll test her out in some deeper water and kind of make that final determination. But even if Kevin does need to stay, we might be able to give her prosthetic flippers. But Kevin likes to hang out right where the water comes in, because it feels pretty good. It's like the jet of a hot tub. But a lot of our little juvenile greens came in because of tumors. Sometimes there's a very large difference. So like this is Bumpy. Bumpy came in back at the beginning of November. Bumpy was named Bumpy because covered in bumps. So she was a mess. So she had tumors everywhere. Both eyes, all over her neck, all over her flippers. She was a mess. Didn't look real good. But now she is tumor-free. She is doing very, very well. She just has to heal up a little bit more and then get stronger, build up an immunity to the virus. And then once that happens, then she'll be able to be released. So later this year. But it's, even though she's no longer Bumpy, because she no longer has any tumors, the name kind of sticks. Okay, so those are those guys. But then we do have a couple of what we call post-hatchlings. So babies, but not newborn babies. Because nesting season is May through October. So it's not nesting season now, so we don't have any babies. But we've got 3 guys just about this size, about 6 to 7 months old. This is Poseidon. We have two of them. These are two little loggerheads. We've got Neptune. So Neptune has a little N on his shell. And Poseidon has a little P, because otherwise they look identical and we can't tell them apart. So these are just about 7-month-old loggerheads. So when they grow up, they'll look like Judy and Dusenberry and Coco. But they're still tiny at this point. But we get the babies here when they don't quite make it to the ocean by themselves. So sometimes they'll get stuck at the bottom of their nest, or they'll get distracted by light and walk towards land instead of towards the water. But when that happens, they're not sick, they're just weak, they're exhausted. So they come to us. Typically we only keep them for about a month or so, and then let them go. But when we can, we'll keep 1 or 2 of them. This past year, we decided to keep Neptune and Poseidon, and we'll keep them for the next 2 years. So that way, they'll be a lot bigger, a lot healthier, a lot stronger, so they'll have a much better chance of survival. It's what we call our Head Start program, because we're basically giving them a head start on life. Because when they're this little, like he's pretty tiny little turtle, that means that they're easy prey. Because birds, fish, sharks, kind of everything wants to eat them. But they do have a couple of adaptations. So, let's see if I can spin him. So he's got on his back, he's got those little spikes. And he also has those little spikes kind of down the back end of his shell as well. That's for protection. Because if it looks like he's spiky and it's going to hurt to eat him, you're not going to want to eat him. It'd be like you trying to bite into a pineapple. You don't need to do it to know that it'll hurt. And then as he grows up, as he gets bigger, those spikes disappear. Because even Dusenberry at 100 pounds, he didn't have tumors, or he doesn't have those spikes. But he's 100 pounds. He's a lot bigger. He doesn't need them. Plus, the color is a little bit different when they're babies. Because he's kind of more of like this reddish-orange color, rather than that kind of brownish-orange. So that's because if Poseidon was in the wild, he'd be offshore in the floating sargassum seaweed, which is typically a reddish-brownish color. So this way it's kind of camouflage. And sea turtles cannot pull their heads and their flippers inside their shell like a box turtle can. So their heads and their flippers are always out, which means that when they do want to go to sleep, they'll kind of do like Neptune. They'll kind of tuck their front flippers on top of their back and kind of tuck their rear flippers underneath. So that way if you are a shark or a fish kind of cruising around looking for a turtle to eat, he doesn't really look like a turtle. Especially if he tucks himself up underneath the seaweed, he'll just look like another bunch of seaweed. Whereas when they're older, when they want to go to sleep, they'll go find a rock or a ledge, something to sleep under. Okay, so let's do some questions.
All right. Well, Teresa, thank you so much for introducing us to some of the turtles and teaching us a little bit about some of the troubles that they face. And of course, thanks for all the good work you do at the Turtle Hospital. All right. Well, we got a great group of classrooms from different spots around Canada and the United States. So let's start meeting some of those classrooms. So let's go to Mrs. Harrison's class first. There's kindergartens, grade 1s, and grade 2s hanging out in Ear Falls, Ontario. Let me turn their microphone on. How's everyone doing this morning?
We're doing well, thank you. Yeah. Our question is,
what are sea turtles' predators?
Well, their predators depends on their size. Because when they're little, like these guys are like itty bitty, like Neptune's just a little bit smaller than Poseidon. Which means that everything wants to eat them. Birds, fish, sharks in the ocean. Before they even make it to the ocean, it can be crabs, birds, raccoons, foxes, feral dogs, fire ants. There's all sorts of problems. Once they do get to the ocean, like they get a little bit safer, but it's only really once they get to be over 100 pounds that they really become safer. But a 100-pound turtle is going to be at least like close to 10 years old. So it takes them a longer time to get to that size. Because like even Kent's like 170 pounds, which means that if she was in the wild, she'd be pretty safe. But she's close to like 20 years old, which means that she had to survive to this point.
That'll work.
But once they get to this size, really it's got to be a really hungry shark, a very large shark, to be able to go after something this size.
Or how much do you see?
All right, so let's jump over and meet another classroom. This time we're going to go to Guelph, Ontario. There's a group of kindergarten students gathered in the library. Let me turn their microphone on. How's it going, Guelph, Ontario?
Great. We have our kindergartens love the presentation. They just had to leave, but we have a grade 3 class here. So we have a question for you. Come on up.
How could we help turtles so they don't get gross?
Well, an easy thing to do, no matter where you live, whether it's on the ocean or not, is to not litter. Because everything ends up in the ocean eventually. And something that a lot of people don't always think about are balloons. Because if you let a balloon go into the air, it has to come down eventually. And think about it. What does a balloon or even a plastic bag look like floating in the water? It looks like jellyfish. It looks like food. So these turtles eat it thinking that it's food. And then it makes them sick. And that just kind of goes along the same thing. Like if you go to the grocery store, bring a reusable bag. Don't get the plastic bags. Don't use single-use plastics. So bring your own water bottle instead of getting a bottle of water. Don't use plastic straws. Don't use some of these things that don't have any other use. And if you do have to use anything like that, make sure you recycle it. So that way it'll have a use in its second life.
All right, this time we're going to jump over to Wisconsin. We have Mrs. Harmon, some kindergarten students joining us. Let me turn their microphone on. How are we doing, Wisconsin?
We're good. Go ahead, Oliver. My name's Oliver, and why do you need names for the turtle?
Well, the names are so that way we can tell them all apart. Because they each do get their own individual, like, stranding number. But it's really hard to remember 53 strings of numbers. And we've been here for 30 years now. In that time, we've had over 1,600 turtles. Wow. So that's a lot of kind of numbers to try to remember. So we give them names. Especially since, like, we kind of get attached to these guys. Like this guy, this is Bubblebutt. He is the original Bubblebutt. He's been here since 1989. So, like, he's kind of our family. Just like when you have a dog or a cat as a pet, they become a part of your family. Well, so do these guys. It's just kind of one-sided because they don't really feel like family, or they don't feel like we're family to them. Just because their brains aren't built that way because they're solitary. But it means that it's a good thing because it means that when they do get released, they have no problems being released and going back to a normal turtle.
All right, let's meet another classroom. This time, let's go to Mrs. Cardena's class. They're grade 2s joining us from Burke in the United States. When I turn your mic on, let me know where that is in the U.S. Let me turn your microphone on. How you doing, grade 2s?
Good.
Hi. So we have one question from Andrew.
What are some of the bigger turtles' adaptations?
Well, biggest adaptation is just size. Like when the turtles are big, makes it unlikely for them to be eaten. It's not impossible, but it's a lot more unlikely. And that's kind of their biggest defense is their size, their shell. And when sea turtles, especially when they're getting attacked by a shark, what they'll do is they'll twist and they'll turn. They'll keep their back or their bellies to the shark because it's a lot harder for the shark to bite them. Think about you trying to pinch your hand. You can pinch the side of your hand very easily, but you try to pinch the palm of your hand, it's a lot more difficult.
So it's wider, so it's harder for the shark to bite down.
All right. Mrs. Munn's class, they're grade 2-3s, joining us in Brucefield, Ontario. Let me turn their microphone on. Hey, grade 2-3s, how are ya?
Canada.
You can ask your question.
How did you catch the turtles?
Well, when the turtles are sick, they're pretty weak. Like the turtles in here, these guys are pretty fast because these guys are pretty healthy. So like when you're healthy, you guys can run pretty fast. But think about when you get sick. How you just kind of want to lay on the couch and watch TV all day? Well, that's kind of what the turtles want to do too. They just kind of want to sleep. They don't want to have to do anything. So like this is Tortuga. Tortuga came in with those tumors, but she just had surgery yesterday. So that's why her little flipper is all bandaged. But she just had surgery. So she just kind of will sleep for most of today. And then we'll kind of unbandage it tonight and see how it looks like. And then if we need to, we'll rebandage it or kind of leave it open. But for today, she's just going to kind of veg out, sleep, kind of chill.
Like, you know, like, what about why the mark?
All right, and our final last classroom is joining us from San Antonio, Texas. Mr. Gallagher is grade 2s, and your microphone should be on. How you doing, grade 2s?
Hello? Kevin. The question comes from Kevin.
How many turtles do you save per year, and how many turtles do you release per year?
Exactly.
Well, every year we typically get in about 100 turtles. Like some years it's a little higher, some years it's a little lower. It's typically right around 100. And we're typically able to release about 70% of them. But they're not always within the same year. And so sometimes we might have 100 turtles come in, but only have like 40 or 50 releases for that same year. Because some of these turtles will be here for more than 6 or 8 months. So that means that they'll get rescued in one year and released in the other. But it's typically the boaters and the fishermen, the people that are out there on the water. So they're the ones that find these turtles because the Keys are pretty long. The Keys are about 100 miles, which is a lot of ocean. Like that's why we have so many sea turtles down here, because we do have so much ocean. But we can't patrol all of that ocean ourselves. We rely on the people out there to find them for us. And then one of our rehab staff is always on call. So all they have to do is call us. We have an ambulance. We'll go pick the turtle up. But we've got some pelican friends out here on the pilings today. We typically have iguanas out here, but I don't see any iguanas right now. There's all sorts of wildlife down here. It's Florida. It doesn't get very cold, which means everything likes to grow. That's why the turtles like it. The turtles are reptiles, so they're cold-blooded, which means they get their body temperature based off of the water temperature. So they much prefer it when it's warm.
All right, not too bad of a view from your workplace every day.
Nope.
All right, well, we visited each of the classrooms, so we do still have some time. So what I'll do is if another classroom has questions, send somebody up to the camera and give a wave. And that's how I'll know that I need to visit your class again for another question. Looks like Mrs. Harrison sent somebody up already, so your microphone is on.
A question?
Oh, maybe like
What are the white floating tubes in the tank?
On record.
Those are toys. So in the wild, turtles have rocks and ledges and reefs, things that they can hide under or sleep under, rub their shells up against. So when they're here, especially when they're sick, we can't give them a reef, so they get PVC pipe instead. Because they do have nerve endings throughout their shell. So like Kevin here, Kevin likes to swim around those things, but she also likes to sit right where the water comes in because it feels good. It's like the jet of a hot tub. Like think about somebody rubbing your fingernail. How you can feel that? Well, that's what they feel.
All right, and I see someone at the camera in Mr. Gulahar's class in San Antonio. Your microphone's on.
What's the biggest turtle you saved so far?
Well, the biggest turtle we currently have is a 300-pound green. That was Bowie. The largest turtle we've ever had was about 375 pounds. She was a green sea turtle. Her name was Farley. She was entangled in a crab trap. So we had to amputate a flipper, and then she was able to be released.
All right. I see someone in blue at Mrs. Harmon's camera, so your microphone is on.
What if a turtle breaks the shell?
Well, it depends on how the shell is broken, just like with people. Because that shell is bone, which means it is able to heal. But just like with people, sometimes like you get broken to a point that there's nothing the doctors can do. Unfortunately, that sometimes happens with the turtles. Like some turtles we cannot save, but most of them we can. And sometimes you can't do like a cast over their shell. So we'll use sometimes like stainless steel strips, sort of like stitches. Like we do have a boat strike turtle now. His name is Tomo. So he's down here. And Tomo was kind of hit more on the side of the shell. So like Tomo's a 120-pound loggerhead, but she's got a couple of little indents there on that back right side of her shell. Because their shells do heal, so it'll heal, but it never fully regenerates. So she'll always have a couple scars on the back there. It won't hurt. It'll just look a little bit funny. Just like for people, like if you get a large, deep cut, it'll heal, but you'll always have kind of a scar. You'll always have an indent. Scars are part of growing up.
Okay, and I see someone in Mrs. Cardena's class up at the camera. Your microphone's on.
How old can turtles get?
Average lifespan is about 70 to 100 years. So pretty long time.
The grandparents.
All right, and then looks like Mrs. Munn has someone up at the camera. Lots of turtle questions.
What's the weather like there?
It's nice and warm and sunny. I think high today is supposed to be 85. So it may be winter and snowing everywhere else, but down here there's just a couple clouds, lots of sun, not too windy, kind of perfect boat day or beach day. That's why we like living in the Keys.
All right, and back to Guelph, Ontario. I see someone up at the camera. Let me turn your mic on. There we go.
Why did you choose to rescue sea turtles?
There's your question. Why did you choose to save sea turtles?
Well, somebody has to save turtles, and it's something that I love. I was kind of lucky enough to get a job in something that I'm passionate about. But I grew up on the coast of Florida. Like I knew that I always wanted to go into something marine science related. So I went to college, got my degree in marine science. And then as soon as I was able to, I started volunteering, doing sea turtle nesting. So kind of keep an eye out for the new nests and help them when they hatch. And then once I started doing that, I kind of got obsessed with turtles. And that was kind of it.
Quickly, the longer you take, the longer.
All right. Well, we were able to visit each classroom again for round 2, which is awesome. And we have just a little bit of more time left, so maybe we can get 1 or 2 more questions. So if I see some more waving at the camera, I'll know we should probably visit one more time. So let's go to San Antonio first.
There you go, Justin. Ask your question.
How thick can a turtle shell be?
Big. Good job. Perfect.
How big can the turtle shell be?
How thick?
How thick? Well, it's not going to be as thick as like your bones because your bones are rounder. Typically, it's not much more than like half an inch, like a little bit less than a half an inch thick, but it's thick enough for what they need. And that way it's also not quite as heavy.
Half inch all the way around. That's pretty heavy.
All right, and right in Mrs. Cardena's class, I see someone nice and close.
Are there any other reasons turtles have shells than protection?
Well, that's their main reason, because sea turtles don't have very many like offensive capabilities. Like a turtle's not going to chase down a shark and bite it. So you kind of have two different versions of animals. You have the animals that are more kind of like complete predators, like the apex predators like the sharks. So yeah, they don't need a lot of armor because if something tries to eat them, they'll just bite them back. But then you have some animals like the turtles, which their kind of first instinct is not to fight back, but it's to either try to hide or get away. And so that's why they have that shell. And that's why, like, when they are getting attacked by a shark, they'll twist and they'll turn to get away.
All right, and let's go to Mrs. Munn's class again. I see someone I think is nice and close.
How many kinds of sea turtles do you get?
Well, we primarily get the loggerheads and the greens, but there's about 5 species found around Florida. We do have one other species here. Her name is Bender. She's a Kemp's Ridley. She's one of our permanent residents. She's in our big pool, but she's very shy, so she likes to hide. So we currently have 3 species. The other 2 species are the hawksbill and the leatherback, but those are more critically endangered. We don't see them as often. Like the hawksbills are the ones with the very pretty tortoiseshell pattern on their shell. So they're the ones that we used to make tortoiseshell jewelry and glasses out of. So they are very rare. And the leatherbacks are huge. Leatherbacks will get to be about 2,000 pounds. So they're massive. They don't like being near shore. They don't like the shallow waters. So they don't like the Keys. They like to spend most of their lives way offshore, more middle of the ocean.
Okay, and we'll take our final question from Mrs. Harmon's class. Let me turn the mic on.
How old do the big turtles get?
Average lifespan's about 70 to 100 years. So a turtle like Judy, who's about 150 pounds, could say is between 15 to 20 years old. Whereas a smaller turtle, like No Name, she's maybe only 5 to 8 years old. So she's a lot younger because she's a lot smaller.
All right. Well, Teresa, once again, thank you for another great trip down to the Turtle Hospital, down to the Florida Keys. You're doing a great job down there, you and the whole team. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for taking us somewhere nice and warm and teaching us a little bit about conservation and the things we can do as well to help turtles.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I'm going to turn the microphones on. And classrooms, now's your chance to be nice and loud and to say goodbye and thank you to the turtles. Goodbye and thank you to Teresa. So here we go. Microphones are coming on. Nice and loud, classrooms. All right. Once again, everybody, thanks for hanging out today. That was a lot of fun. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much, Teresa.
Bye-bye.